What's up, investors? It's the Russian dude. Let's get straight to the point. Talk about some ridiculous Russian propaganda. Okay, today we have Vitaly Milonov. You probably heard about this guy, or at least seen him. Long story short, he said that only real men in Russia can qualify only if you've ever served in the army or if you are married and have kids. You better have 2 kids, preferably, he said, with the same woman. Otherwise, if you do not fill these basic qualifications, you will be unhappy. And yes, this comes from a guy who did go to the front lines in the special military operation. He took some pictures, he worked for like couple of days as a pointer for artillery, and then he was like, I'm gonna leave it to the professionals, I don't need to be here, I better work with my head back in Moscow. And later on, whenever people online were saying that, well, I'm pretty happy and I'm single, Vitaly Milonov responded to them. He said that all of this is because of the Western propaganda, because of these Western movies, Tom Cruise, all these superheroes who are single men, who are portrayed as these lone wolves. And because of this, Russian men, they watch these movies and they think that it is actually cool to be single. Well, he proposed that going forward, Russian propaganda, especially Russian movies, should never ever show single men in their movies and TV shows as happy. They should be shown as miserable, or in the worst case scenario, they should be shown as the enemies to the motherland. Well, as simple as that. As always, enough of this clownship. Now let me give you an update from the territory of Russia, because we had an unsuccessful Kremlin Purge 3.0. First of all, before we talk about here this particular topic, in Kursk, local residents reported some very loud noises. We are yet to discover what actually happened. In Voronezh, according to the British intelligence report, they are the ones who confirmed that one of previous attacks by Ukrainians was able to destroy the entire massive ammunition warehouse of Russians, which was approximately 9 square kilometers in size. Guys, believe me, this is big. And talking about this unsuccessful Kremlin Purge, it did happen in Moscow last morning. Long story short, a car of Andriy Tergashov, this is basically a chief of the satellite communication center of the Russian army. Long story short, the car, civilian car, got a surprise. Whenever you start the ignition, there was big fireworks, things like this, right? Apparently, this was not the same guy. It was also Andrei Tergashov, but not the one which was supposed to be targeted from the Ministry of Defense of Russia. This was just somebody who shared the very same first name and last name. Well, unfortunate for this guy, he was in the middle of this fight, of this Kremlin Purge. But it kind of shows you that the only way out of the Ministry of Defense of Russia is either this, high-rise building, sweet Russian tea, or similar activities. Now let me give you a brief update from the eastern and southern front lines, because approximately 90,000 Russians are assembling along the Zaporozhye front line. To begin with, we make a stop in Luhansk, and as you can see right here, a local TV tower has been damaged by Ukrainians. This is basically them preventing Russian propaganda infecting the minds of the locals. Along the settlement progress, Russians are making progress. And so, long story short, unfortunately, it is almost semi-encircled at this point. Ukrainians are still fighting, Ukrainians are holding their positions, but most likely in the near future they will have to retreat from this city. And speaking about Ukrainians defending their positions, in the last 24 hours they were able to repel a total of 14 Russian attacks against settlements such as Vasyukivka, Orikhovo-Vasilievka, Novomarkove, Chasev Yar, Ivanovske, Stupachke and Andriivka. Along Vuhledar-Novomikhailivka front line there was a pretty big offensive attempt by Russians, which also was repelled by Ukrainians, and Russians lost 5 T-62 tanks, 5 infantry fighting vehicles, 2 armored personnel carriers and 2 more military armored vehicles. And as a whole, a total number of Russian military vehicles which was destroyed along entire front lines both in the south and the east is the following: 12 artillery systems, 17 tanks and 25 various kinds of armored vehicles. In Chorny Lis, for example, right here is the video of Ukrainians destroying a Russian air defense system called Buk. And here is the statistics, which shows that since the beginning of this so-called special military operation, Russians already lost more than 900 air defense systems, which is, to say the least, a pretty big number. And speaking about what Russians are doing, well, unfortunately, this is one of their favorite tactics, which is attacking civilian and residential neighborhoods. For example, in Kharkov, a local industrial zone has been severely damaged. As we go to the south, approximately 20 Russian Shahed drones were intercepted above Odessa, but the debris still damaged some residential areas. And reportedly, even one more Russian Shahed drone fell on the territory of Romania. But so far, Ukrainian air defense is doing superior job, intercepting 8 reconnaissance drones of Russians, 17 out of 23 Shahed drones, but unfortunately not a single missile was intercepted. And speaking about Zaporozhye, according to the Ukrainian intelligence, yes, approximately 90,000 of these soldiers were spotted assembling along Zaporozhye front lines, with the last 3 days 2,000 more these soldiers arriving to this big concentration. So the question here might be the following: how do Ukrainians even know all of this? Well, first of all, of course, there is military intelligence. Second, there are FPV drones Ukrainians are flying. They can literally see Russians assembling. I mean, 90,000 people, it's hard to miss them. But another pretty unusual thing, how Ukrainians were able to find that there is, first of all, a concentration in the first place, are the mobile phones. And yes, the mobile phones I'm talking about are the ones which these soldiers are carrying with them, I know, such as iPhones, Blackberries, Samsungs, Nokias, Motorola's, whatever, you name it, right? Because think about it, the Ukrainian cell towers, for example in Zaporozhye, to the north or the south, they are still active. And those Russian phones involuntarily, they connect to these cell towers, pretty much revealing their positions. And so obviously Ukrainian cell operators, they work with the Ukrainian army, so they pass along this data either on request or this is just their own initiative. So once again, yeah, you see a big concentration in particular areas, so you can assume that, I mean, there is no way there are civilians in these combat areas along front lines. So the only reasonable justification you can make is that these are the Z soldiers. And in addition to that, some particularly stupid ones, they literally take pictures along the front lines, revealing everything, revealing trenches, the munition, revealing the military equipment, how many people they are, and they post those things on social medias, Instagram, Facebooks. Well, the officer might see it and they say like, what are you doing? You have to delete it right now. But once something is on the internet, well, it always stays there. You cannot simply erase it just as simple. And the thing which the Russian authorities and military representatives decided to do to fight against this involuntary stupidity is to prosecute those Z soldiers who will be found carrying phones with cameras and recording capabilities. They will be kinda held in custody, like things like this, for 15 days. And that's pretty much it. So as you can imagine, not that many Z soldiers are afraid of these consequences. They continue bringing phones with them. Well, it's not like Ukrainians are complaining, Ukrainians are in favor of such activities. And ultimately, let's talk about Ukraine, which is now seriously considering peace negotiations with Russia. This recently came from the representative of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Dmytro Kuleba. This is a pretty high-ranking official, as you can imagine. And this is an extra chapter, so if you want to continue watching, guys, please follow along. Patreon link is down below, the best way to support my work here on YouTube. The only source of income, I would say, at this point. So yeah, thanks so much for your support. The link to my Patreon is down below. Well, there I have it. Thank you so much for watching this video, guys. Please like this video, subscribe to my channel if this was interesting, informative, or both. Other useful links are down below. PayPal donations, Patreon, Instagram, the Russian Dude merch, and useful videos in front, to the right, to the left side of me will appear on your screen. Thanks so much for watching. See you tomorrow.